Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And today we have a returning guest, but that's not going to be a problem because he has a new book. Anyway, it is my co-author on our two Monkees books, but he's written a brand new book that's not the Monkees, but another popular group. And his name is Michael A. Ventrella. How are you doing, sir?
Nice to be here again, Mark.
Hey. So,
Ironically,
anyways,
we never even met until after the book was done. It's kind of weird. Never met online on it.
anyway, well, there's a lot of people I haven't met. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I do this podcast and, I interview people all over the world, literally. I mean, I've interviewed people in England and Australia and stuff like that. So, and then, not to name names, I'll just in case I don't want to offend anybody, but sometimes you don't know how tall people are. And then you see a photo of them with somebody else and you find out either how A, tall they are or how B, short they are compared to said
Mhm.
celebrity. And it's like, whoa, because if you meet face to face, everybody's just a head. So I don't think you have a body because I've never no.
No, no.
Anyway. Anyway, so here is the brand new book that Michael A. Ventrella has done. It's all The Beatles on the Charts. All group and solo albums, singles ranked by popularity. Now,
Yes.
I
Took
mean,
me
the
years to
obvious.
write. Take a
What?
look. It
What?
took me years to write. Will you take a look? There you go.
Now, I know the reason you wrote it, but tell our audience why you wrote it.
Well, in the back of one of our Monkees books, I went through every single Monkees album and single and sort of made a chart. I made using the charts, the Billboard charts. I made a countdown. So
Mm,
every song that got to be number one got 100 points. Every song that got to be number 100 got 1 point, and so on. So the longer it stayed on the charts and the higher it got, the more points it got. And then we did a countdown, and I did that for the Monkees book. And I thought this would be a good idea for a Beatles book. No one's actually done that before with all the thousands of Beatles books there are out there. So yeah, that's sort of where the idea came from. But there's a little bit more of it because if you go back to my history, as I talked about in the introduction, I've always been a follower of the charts, and I used to keep them myself even before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only book that compares, but that book's over 40 years old, so it's very out of date, is this book called The Beatles on Record. But it didn't go through the specific chart placement. It just said, it would have like I remember it would be Billboard, Cashbox, Record World, and it would be I Want to Hold Your Hand backed with I saw her standing there, you know. Yeah, and each one was 111, and that's it because they didn't have any. So it didn't tell you how many weeks it was on the charts. It didn't have any other further information. Um, One thing I have read through it, but I don't know exactly or didn't check all your calculations. In that original Beatles book called The Beatles on Record, they listed Wonderful Christmas Time by McCartney as not charting at all, but it did chart on the Christmas charts and went up to number 6. So how come you're silent all of a sudden? Um,
I didn't have
oh,
anything to say.
oh,
Right?
okay, okay, you're just
I was listening.
okay. Anyway, sorry.
You're
Anyway,
correct.
but were you taking those other types of charts into account? It was just purely the Hot 100 on all these?
They're the Hot 100, and one of the reasons is there were a lot of those little charts. They had the R&B chart, and they had the they basically they made a chart for anything. The 100 was supposed to encapsulate all of them, but it really didn't.
Yeah.
For instance, all the Christmas songs never showed up on the regular chart at all.
Hmm.
Now they do count the Christmas songs. So every Christmas, you're going to see Mariah Carey jump back up to number one again, and Bing Crosby even shows up again. And
Right.
now we can see what now Wonderful Christmas Time and Happy Christmas War is Over do show up every now and then, because it's Christmas time and they sell again. I wish they had done it back then, but they didn't.
Okay.
Because
I
that's
actually
one thing
did.
that makes sense. You look at it and say, "Oh, Wonderful Christmas Time, first chart appearance, 2020." Well, that doesn't make any sense,
I
right?
actually didn't know that, but I don't. I think I, like you, used to kind of follow the Billboard charts religiously,
Yep.
and you might have even taken it a step further than me. But I mean, I used to kind of try to predict what might make it to number one, and I'd always be kind of upset when it didn't make it. It'd stall at
Exactly.
4 or something like that. Or I'd be fascinated when a song like I think this happened roughly around 1982. I think it was the number one position for 10 weeks was like Physical by Olivia Newton-John. And at the very same time, the number two position was Waiting for a Girl Like You by Foreigner. And I was like, I wonder if it'll ever overtake it. It didn't. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, the other thing you have to take into consideration too is that the charts are not science,
no,
and this book is not science. So
yeah,
don't think that just because something came in low, it's not, it didn't sell real well, because it might have sold great, but the way the charts are predicted, the way they're put together is not the same as it is. And a song could be at number two and only sell one less copy than the one at number one, and maybe more than whatever number one sold the week before. So, it's not, it just shows you how they did in relation to other songs at the same time. Let's put it that way.
right. And I do know the answer to this, but I'll ask because some people might be curious. A song like Twist and Shout, which actually is charted two separate occasions, in fact, on two different labels, Tolly and Capitol, are those both taken into consideration or just the first time around?
No, every time. So that's one of the reasons why Twist and Shout comes on real high on our countdown, is because it was on the charts for so many weeks. It fell off and came back up again. And I didn't think it was right to do it twice, because I certainly don't do it with the albums. Albums fall off the charts and come back up all the time.
Right.
Abbey Road, fell off the charts, and then now it's literally back on now. I don't think it's fallen off in the last 5 years. So the way they do these things, I didn't want to count every single time something popped up, because Abbey Road's popped up 20 times. So it's not worth it.
Okay. So going back to the Christmas thing, I mean, it's theoretically possible, but not probable that the two Christmas songs we mentioned would uh, over the years overtake other records if you did an update on this book.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you want to look 50 years from now, and they'll probably still be playing Wonderful Christmas Time and Happy Christmas. They'll probably be doing really well in this book, because they're
Okay.
going up, all the time.
Yeah. I mean, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's just kind of an interesting way to look at it, So,
That's why I'm
um,
saying you can't take this book as science. It's a fun read.
right.
Countdown is not completely accurate because of the fact that the way they do countdowns is different. We can talk about that later if you want to. But the idea is simply just have a fun read. It's basically a Beatles discography, but in order, in a different order.
Different
Well,
orders. Yeah.
actually, no, it's not. It's not a complete discography, but some things didn't make the charts at all, and they're not in the book.
Oh,
Ringo's
okay.
Christmas album, for instance, isn't even in the book because it never made the charts, even though it should have.
hmm That's interesting. I thought it had, but maybe not. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nor I thought McGear would make the charts too, but I
Which
searched and never did.
which one?
McGear,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Paul's brother, yes.
Right, right.
Yeah, and
Um,
the Fireman albums made the charts,
and
so
and what was your criteria that way? I mean, it's like McGear you're mentioning, and it's ostensibly a Wings in Disguise effort,
well,
as
that's what I'm
is
in that one.
Holidays by blah, blah,
Yeah,
I
right. But that
Denny
didn't make
Lane. I couldn't think of his name. I was gonna say Bob Dylan. I was like, no, Denny Lane. You know.
no, yeah, if it was really a Beatles project, obviously Wings, obviously, the Wilburys, they should count. They're pretty much Beatles projects. If they were one of the main members in the group, then certainly it would count. So I did count, Susie and the Red Stripes, which was basically Linda and
Yeah.
Wings. I would have counted McGear if it had made the charts,
Yeah.
because to me that was pretty much. It might not have used Paul's name, but it was sort of a Wings album in some ways, as if his brother had joined Wings,
Right.
So it's but it didn't make it, so it became irrelevant. All I counted any album that had the Beatles individually or in a group. And when
Mhm.
it came to singles, I had to count it if they were giving credit.
Yeah.
So on some of those singles, uh, uh, Michael Jackson did with Paul McCartney, they counted because Paul was given credit next to him.
hmm
Paul also did some, but Paul's played bass and sang on lots of albums, and they didn't necessarily, he wasn't credited equally with the original person, so I didn't count those.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I had to go 4 or 5 seconds, even
Yeah, I
though I
was going
didn't
to
want.
mention that one. It's like, I actually like your commentary on that one. If you disagree, I'm paraphrasing. If you disagree with this, you can always just toss it out and move everyone up. But
Yeah, like I said,
just,
this isn't, all the charts I use are in the back of the books. You can do your own calculations however you want.
yeah. Since you probably researched this for the purposes of the book, tell, explain how Billboard records were charted back in the '60s and even up until pretty recently, because it changed somewhere along the line, and then how they do it now.
It's changed quite a bit. When it first started, they relied a lot on radio play, and they would basically do it like someone does a survey where they get a percentage of radio stations and record stores and just ask them and use that as a guideline. Um, and so radio play made a lot of difference. A song would zoom up the chart as the DJ liked, and then it would zoom right back down again, when they get tired of it, even if it was still selling. It also meant that B sides were counted as even though they were on the same piece of vinyl, which was kind of weird because there were album cuts that were being heard too, but they never made the charts because they were never on a 45, which
Right.
you know, I mean, when Sergeant Pepper came out, they were playing every single cut on Top 40 radio, even though they weren't singles, but they never made the chart, for instance.
Hmm.
Then in the 70s, around the time of Come Together and Something, they were both zooming up the charts together. It was going to be number one and number two probably.
Hmm.
And then Billboard said, "All right, heck with that. We're not gonna count B sides anymore." So they switched them together, and suddenly they became number one. And all the B sides that had appeared on the charts from that point on disappeared. Now, in the 70s, they started getting a little more technical. They got a lot better about going to the record stores and getting the numbers, and it was much more based on sales as opposed to just radio play. And so songs would stay on the charts longer because people were still buying them. Then we got the scanning devices, and the numbers got even better. And once they started doing the scanning devices, they discovered something weird: is people sometimes buy country albums and rap albums too, and suddenly those things started getting up on the charts that had not been shown before. So it was a lot more accurate at that point, and they were relying more on sales. Then the internet happened. So what they do now is they look at streaming, they look at like Spotify, they look at YouTube downloads, they look at whatever is downloaded and what people are listening to. So now we're almost back to just, we're just almost back to popularity as opposed to sales, because they're not just counting sales anymore. They're not counting download sales, or they're counting just listening.
Hmm.
So we're kind of going back the other way. And what's weird about that is a song can disappear forever and suddenly zoom back up. Remember Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill, right?
Right.
Great song from the 80s. It was on a TV show and it zoomed back up to number one like 30 years later
Hmm.
because people are suddenly downloading it all over the place. So that would never have happened under the old system. The other thing is some artists will come out with a new album. Taylor Swift comes out with an album, and every single song on that album is in the top 10 for a couple of weeks at least, as
Right.
everyone's down. So people are saying, "Ah, look, she's breaking the Beatles record." Well, no, she isn't, because it's a completely different way to do it. If they had done it back that way, the Beatles would have been all over the charts
Yeah.
constantly. The
Yeah.
White Album would have come out, and the top 30 spots would be Beatles.
Right. So that's crazy. It's just,
That's,
I think it's kind of unfair how they do it now, because I mean, you could just put out anything and it's like you could chart the A sides, B sides, or whatever, and it's just whatever, you know. To me, it's like, if it's not a single unless it's actually a physical single, and
well, I don't
but
know about.
then there haven't been
I don't buy vinyl anymore. I download everything myself. The problem I have is here's the way I'm looking at it, and I
yeah.
think this is what you're thinking, and tell me what you think. If I download it and I buy it, it should count, obviously. But what
Yeah.
if I subscribe to a service? I don't want to download it. I just want to listen to it in the background with all the other songs I picked from that service. When they play it, the songwriter does get paid. So in a sense, maybe it only be pennies, but they are getting paid. So maybe they should count the downloads, but maybe they should count them less. I don't know. It's just a weird way of looking at it.
So they aren't counting downloads as well. Is that what you're saying? I thought you said that they were, but
Oh, they are
maybe.
counting downloads. I'm saying maybe they should count downloads here because I'm paying for it
Oh,
as a
more
listen.
significantly. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
More significantly, maybe they do. I don't know. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I'm not in on that.
Yeah, I
It's
don't know, but it always, in my mind, it always should have been based on sales. But you know,
my point is, even if you're paying Spotify to listen to that song, that is a sale. It's just
Yes,
a
no, I agree with that. So
yeah.
I think that should count. But I mean, it used to bug me. Like, in fact, it says it in some book about the Beatles. I don't know which one, but it's talking about certain British records of the Beatles charting better than American ones, based on that they just sold better. And it was just like, or vice versa, that they sold worse. Like, if you follow the Beatles charts post 67, a lot of Beatles records in England didn't make number one, strangely enough. It's it's kind of odd. Whereas here they still made number one all the way through Long and Winding Road, and
Well,
they didn't even put Long and
almost.
Winding Road over in England. But what?
John and Yoko did not make number one. The Ballad of John and Yoko did not make number one. But generally speaking, you are correct.
Yeah, yeah.
Nominally.
But like, I think Lady Madonna made it to number 4 or something like that, and I think even Something Come Together made it to only 2 or something like that, if I remember. It might have been Get Back.
No,
One of the other ones made it only to
it
2.
did make it number one. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's like, they weren't a consistent number one act based
right.
on, since the British ones are only based on sales and not airplay. See, here Beatles are guaranteed airplay, at least at that time. Now, not,
Pretty much.
maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, because
Well,
the
there were a few earlier Beatles singles that did not make number one in America, but they were almost all American only singles, like Nowhere Man. That wasn't released as a single in Britain, and it
yeah,
didn't make number one in America.
yeah,
But generally speaking, yeah, you could be pretty guaranteed if it was an official Beatle release as opposed to one of the, 1964 when everything, any record label that had anything to do with the Beatles would put it out. I'm not counting those. Yeah, pretty much it made number one. Absolutely.
yeah. Although there was a bit of a glut of records coming out by mid 64. So yeah, there's like If I
Yeah,
Fell that made to like 12 or something, if I remember
yeah.
correctly,
They were
because
competing with each other, and competing with themselves as opposed to with each other, with other acts. So yes, that definitely is true.
yeah. So I mean, even the aforementioned Beatles on Record, it talks about that. It is just that there's just a glut of material, and by that point, people just opted to buy the album rather than buy yet another single from the Hard Day's Night soundtrack and something new. Which
Yeah.
were
No, yeah, it's a
playing
couple
double
times.
duty on the same album.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I did talk about that a bit. One of the problems with the book, of course, is it talks about the American albums, which aren't even available anymore. Those are the ones I grew up with too before I was able to buy imports in the 70s and suddenly get the better versions.
mhm.
Um, but it's if you ask me today what was on something new, I'm not sure if I could list them, like I could back in those days.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what the American charts were. I can't change that, obviously.
Yeah, I think I've followed the American releases more closely in recent years, just from the standpoint of they put out like those box sets, the Capitol Records #1 and stuff like that. And of course, you always talk about, I don't buy a record collection anymore. You stream most everything and or watch it or whatever, And whereas me, I still like product, I still buy the product,
There's nothing wrong with that. To
Yeah,
each
yeah,
their own.
yeah,
And I,
yeah,
I used to collect everything, and I just got to the point where I didn't care about the packaging. I just wanted the music.
yeah.
So
I did
that's
draw the line on the latest McCartney 80 singles
yeah.
box set, which I would have loved to have owned, but not for $600. So I was thinking about it price wise. I said
He needs the
if it was
money.
around 200, could do it, but
Yeah.
600, no. You know,
Well,
that's it seems like
when
gouging. Anyway, go ahead.
I definitely when the Beatles remix set came out in stereo, I bought that huge box. Because it was I wanted the packaging in that one because there's the booklets that came with it and everything else. But also just because it was probably cheaper than trying to download all those songs.
Yeah. Do you get all those album upgrades and everything, or you just whatever you get?
No, I love it when they remix them. Obviously, I always buy those. I'll agree. I don't download those things.
I
No,
mean,
I'm talking about. It's like I didn't necessarily buy Paul's latest album. I just downloaded it. There was nothing
yeah,
necessarily special about it. But when he remixed Ram, I went out and bought that. You
yeah.
know, I don't know. I guess it depends. But my point is, I don't.
Uh,
Once I get it, I put it on my phone, I put it on my computer, and I put it away, and it's just there. You know what I mean? I'm not using it in the
yeah,
sense that
yeah,
I would take the CD out and put it in the CD player and play it.
yeah. Well, I
Uh,
still play CDs, but that's not the point. And I
yeah,
really detest buying multiple albums over and over, but I'm thinking about it, like I'm sure I bought the White Album like 10 times in my lifetime at least, and
yeah,
all the
yeah.
different formats and the upgrades and everything like that. And then even McCartney 3, I mean, I didn't want to buy so many copies. But I ended up buying, okay, I wasn't going to buy anything other than, how they always have an album and then they do a one with bonus tracks. I always try to
Yes.
get the one with the most tracks on it. In the case of
True.
McCartney 3, there was a Japanese version that has like early versions of like 4 tracks. Now I don't know if you can get those on streaming here, but I don't tend to pay attention to streaming. um but I ordered it from Japan and it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed because it's Japan and it was also the pandemic. So went to Target one day. There's the album minus the 4 tracks, but it's the album and it was on sale. It was like I think 8.99 or something pretty cheap. I said, okay, I'll buy it. So then the Japanese one comes in. So now I have 2 copies. And then I somehow felt like weird that I had the need that uh, well, first of all, before that, I still buy the Beatles and solo albums on vinyl after all these years. And so I had to buy a vinyl version. Now, on this particular vinyl version, I don't know if you read or subscribe to Beatle Fan, but there's like a yellow pressing, there's a green pressing, there's a brown pressing, a pink pressing, a white pressing, a black, and it's like, no, no, I'm not going to go there. But I bought, just what I got, which was just a general black vinyl pressing, and there it is. So that's 3 copies. Then more recently they put McCartney 1, 2, and 3 in a box set, and I said, and I didn't want to buy it. I said I have them all already, and then I just I buy everything else, and I'm kind of jonesing for some new McCartney material. So I bought that because I had heard that the McCartney CD has the Apple on it again, and it does. So I said, well, oh, he never had it on before because since it's been on vinyl. So I wanted a CD with that. It's just a stupid reason. And so yet another version of McCartney 3. you know. And then he does the remix album, and so I have that on vinyl and CD. And if you count those, that's yet another thing. And I'm trying not to buy all these versions, but it's like even Egypt Station, the previous one, I got just the expanded version. And
Right.
then a year later, they put out a new expanded version, but it had new tracks and it took off other tracks. And I said, not only do I have to buy the upgrade to get the other tracks that I want, but I have to keep the old one because they didn't leave, so I have 2 of them now. And I'm like, you know,
Every once in a while, if I go to Amazon or one of those places to try to download an album, they will say this is only available if you buy the CD sometimes. So
yeah.
some of those bonus tracks I have had to buy CDs for just to get them. I agree.
Mhm.
If that's my only choice, that's my only choice.
Yeah. Now, are you still much of a completist as I try to be and get annoyed doing that? You have to have every single song Paul or Ringo puts out at this point,
I
or
used I used to be I don't know why, but I mean I used to work in a record store. I was in a band. I music meant everything. I got every single thing. Elvis Costello burped, and I had to get the CD of it. And and then I don't know. Somewhere along the way, I just stopped caring about that stuff. I just wanted the music. I guess when it became available online and I could get digital copies of things, that's when somehow it hit me that I don't need the packaging. Just
yeah,
get me the song. And it's in some ways it was sad because one of my favorite memories is wandering around Boston or New York when I lived in New York, just going to all the used record stores and spending all day just looking for something. Oh, hey, where did this? I've been looking for this. That was fun,
yeah,
and I don't do that anymore. So it's that
yeah.
that I miss.
Well,
And I miss getting an album with big writing that I can read the lyrics instead of 5-point type that I need a magnifying for.
now, since I kept buying albums and getting into CDs and everything, I'm discouraged a different way. So, first I'll do the vinyl story. So the vinyl story is, in the 70s, vinyl was it. I mean, you could buy cassettes and 8 tracks, but I never really went in those formats. And in the early 80s, CDs came in, and I go, ooh, perfect sound. So, but they're really picky on CDs, and it's like, like there's certain groups where even to this day, their whole discography. Ringo's a good example. Some of his albums to this day are not on CD, and it's just
Yeah,
frustrating, And unless you want to burn your own or bootleg it or something, But I'm talking about legit,
like
releases and
Cold
stuff
Wave.
like that.
Yeah.
And so by the 80s, I got to where I'd buy albums on CD, but I loved vinyl 7-inch singles. And also they tended to put out a lot in those days.
Yes.
Maybe you can
Extended
describe that.
version.
What happened then? That was it just Thriller, or is it there's something in how things are sold that they had to suddenly put 7 singles off a 9-track album? Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was the disco era when everything was about dancing because
Okay.
it seemed like every song that could possibly be extended to 7 minutes was suddenly extended to 7 minutes.
Well, I don't mean that as much as just putting, like Thriller has 9 songs on the album, and
Right.
every song except one is on a single.
Oh yeah, that was
And it's like, and
it
and then
seemed
after that, then Huey Lewis did it, Billy Joel did it, even McCartney tried to, but McCartney didn't make it. And so a lot of times they'd make it to like the fourth single, and that would be the end of that,
yeah, but it's true. And there was a period where it seems like they just would release every single, yeah, every song.
Hmm.
That was amazing to me sometimes when I was working in a store. It's like, what, another single from the same album? That just doesn't make any sense. And some of the, a lot of it depends too, I think, on how often they got albums out. I mean, I was a big Elvis Costello fan, and he put out an album every 6 months or so. And so there wasn't time to put out a lot of singles from the album before the next album was out. Whereas
Yeah,
Thriller lasted 3 years before he made another one.
right. So I guess that kind of explains it. It's like you don't have new product, you gotta do
But yeah,
something with it.
well, from a record label perspective, I can see it. Let's put it out. If it sells, great. If it doesn't, well, we haven't lost that much. We'll at least make our money back. Give me a break. So, sure, let's take advantage of it while we can, which is the same thing that happened to the Beatles in 1964. Everyone put everything they could possibly put out, and let's take advantage of the fad while it's here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Then the 90s rolled around, and this is where I kind of like lose it because 7-inch singles basically went gone, bye bye. And then, they're kind of back now, but whenever you see a 7-inch single, it's always like $15 or something. It's like, it's more than an album, so unless it's something really good or a Beatle related thing, I probably won't buy it on a 7-inch single or something. But that's where I kind of got derailed from reading the charts and stuff so well, because they would incorporate album tracks and things like that into the Hot 100. And I said, wait a minute, they didn't used to do this. Now they're putting album tracks in here. Like, I said Huey Lewis. A good example is like Back in Time from Back to the Future, which I wish they had put out as a 7-inch single, and they never did. But they
Mhm.
got a lot of radio airplay, so suddenly it
Oh,
was
yeah.
album track number 10. And it's like, no, that doesn't count. But I wasn't running Billboard, so
That's right. No, there are a lot of things Billboard did that were very suspicious too. You kind of wondered they probably knew this wasn't an act. I remember the time that a Tony Orlando and Dawn song went from number 25 to number 3, which never happens. And then and I still remember at the time reading articles in other magazines talking about how this is obviously a scam and someone's paid somebody off. And I think Billboard sort of watched itself after that. But you have to wonder why, like, number 9 Dream made it to number 9 and then stopped and went
yeah,
back down.
yeah,
So things like that. And you also wonder when the other magazines at the time had something at number 1 that somehow never made it to number 1 on Billboard's charts, even though all the other magazines said it was number 1. You
yeah,
wonder if they were a little biased in
yeah,
some way and just did their best, or then again, like I said, it's not a science.
yeah. Well, I remember on using Thriller by Michael Jackson as an example. The first 3 or 4 singles went to 1 or 2 or something or other, and then just by the law of just attrition or whatever, that everybody else has bought the album. Why would you buy a single at this point unless there's something brand spanking new about it? But I remember the sixth single was PYT, Pretty Young Thing, and they kept saying, "Ooh, is it going to make it to the top 10?" And it kind of went to like 17, 16,
Yeah,
13, and I said, it's not going to make it. And then the next week, 10, and then the next week was like 21. It's like, oh, come on, you
yeah,
know.
Billboard did it just so they could write an article about how he made it to the top 10
Yeah,
6 times on one album. And then Bruce Springsteen did it with Born in the USA. There was like 6 singles off of that too, if I
yeah, yeah.
remember. Just, whew.
So
Yeah.
anyway, we go into the 90s and the aughts and everything like that, and I'm buying CDs at this point, and I never liked CD singles because I said if I'm going to buy a single, I don't need 10 remixes of, you know,
Mhm.
World in My Eyes or something by Depeche Mode. It's like I just want the album version, thank you. It's like, um, but I'd buy those occasionally, but then were you into like Napster and stuff like that when it came out, or?
At first, yes, I was, and I
Oh,
thought Napster was a great idea. And mostly what I used Napster for was to find unusual things like
yeah.
live versions and things that, or B-sides that had been always very hard to find. And then, of course, when they said, no, you can't do that anymore. Well, I'm a lawyer and I'm not going to risk my law career downloading things from Napster
Oh wow.
anymore.
So,
You
that
know,
didn't
it's
stop me, but then I'm no lawyer, so it's like come and arrest me.
so I haven't done that anymore. No.
Yeah. Well, now supposedly everything's legit. Ha ha ha. I don't know. It's like
I get most of my stuff from Amazon,
yeah,
when
yeah.
I want to download stuff. But honestly, I try to frequent my local record store. We have a local used record store in town, of course, and I try to
Mhm.
give them business. And I do buy a lot of old CDs from them because it's cheaper than downloading the album, really, if you pay
Okay.
$5.
So you're not adverse to having some product.
Oh,
I,
no, no, no.
I got the impression that
All I have,
I got rid of all my collection and I only
no,
do
I
streaming.
could move my camera and you could see all the CDs I still have. But,
No, that's
but I, once I download it on a
excuse me.
computer or my phone, I'm not as interested in it after that, is what I'm trying to say.
I see.
How I
Yeah,
get it is not as important to me as what I get. Let's
yeah,
put it that
yeah. Now the odd thing here, Nate, where you live. It's in Pennsylvania, but is it near? Where are you near?
way. I'm in Stroudsburg, which is sort of right over the border to New Jersey. We're like halfway between Allentown and Scranton. I'm about 80 miles from New York City.
Okay, but in Pennsylvania, what's the biggest city you're closest to then?
Uh, Probably Allentown.
Oh, okay. So, well, how close are you to Philadelphia then, or is
Oh,
it
we're about
across the
100
city?
miles, maybe 120 miles. So I'm
Okay.
closer to New York City than I am to Philadelphia.
Oh, okay. And so, how close is New York City then?
About 80 miles.
Oh, okay. So it's still
Yeah,
not that close. Okay.
we are literally, some cartographers consider us a New York City suburb because we do have people who live here who actually commute to New York for work.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty long commute, but
Yeah.
it's
Well, it's the equivalent here. I'm in the middle of the state, and a lot of people commute, including my wife, all the way to Portland every day, which is nice 2 hour drive. So
yeah,
each direction. So
yeah.
anyway, no, the reason I
So
was
yeah,
asking that
we live in
because
New
I
York.
thought you were more in like a city more than suburbia, and the only
I
reason.
could practically walk to New Jersey. I'm right
Okay.
on the.
And the reason I was asking is perhaps you have a better record store. We did have a pretty good one when I moved here, but they actually closed right before the pandemic. The guy just said, I've done it for 30 years. And it was one of those record stores that they had all the new releases. They got everything. And if they didn't have it, they'd get it. But there's a couple record stores now, they're nice and they get some of the new releases, but mostly
No,
not. And
we
so
got a pretty good, town owned, not part of a any sort of big conglomerate. A
yeah.
local guy who runs it, who I know and talk to all the time, and he sells used stuff and he has new stuff too. He can get anything, and he's got rock and roll books in there. He had our book there for a while, things like
Oh,
that. So it's a good store, and we're a town, but we're not like a backwards, sleepy,
yeah.
town.
Okay. So my point of saying all this is, that, you were saying, it's like you were saying like I miss or I used to do
Yeah,
the record stores like that. But the thing is, I miss that too because I like going into the record store. I didn't know if you ever had Tower Records or an equivalent to that,
well,
where they
absolutely,
had
yeah.
everything and it
In
was a huge
Boston, yeah,
like
I go to Tower all the.
warehouse of everything. And it's like I miss that, but they don't have that. So usually, the closest we have is Barnes and Noble. They'll
Mhm.
get like the really popular stuff. So if you want Taylor Swift's new album, it's there. And they get a few oddball items, like they had Barbara Streisand's first concert or something from 1962 recently. So if you want something like that, of course, when they have these Beatles reissues, they have that. But
Yes.
if you want Ringo's new EP, good luck finding that in the record store. So I order a lot of stuff um, on just Amazon or whatever, and have to get it that way. So it kind of
Yeah, yeah.
removes the
There's
fun
no.
of seeking it out. It's like, okay, I'll just have to
That's
order
why
it from
that's why I like this, because it's a used. It has lots of used CDs, and I
yeah.
find absurd things that I always went. I always wanted to try this for $4. I'll try it. That
Yeah.
kind of.
Now, I
Yeah,
am a fan of some newer groups. We usually are talking, you and I about
yeah,
like Monkees and Beatles and Rolling Stones or whatever, just all old 60s stuff. But, it's not like I try to keep up. I mean, like, even though I said Taylor Swift, I don't really care for her material, the stuff I've heard. So I don't really pursue her
right.
stuff. But I still like Black Eyed Peas, even post Fergie. And I found out the other day, uh, oh, they put out an album at the end of 2022. I didn't know that because
Hmm.
I would have known that in the old days if I go to a record store and said new releases. The
Yeah,
Barnes and Noble didn't have it. It didn't chart either, so they obviously aren't promoting it very well. And so I had to order it online. And Target, you can order it from Target.com, but they don't carry it in the store.
yeah.
So
No,
it's
it's
an
true.
odd way to do shopping and get music in
Well, I get
an
frustrated by that too.
archaic format, I guess.
I was the program director of our college radio station, so I got all the new releases. This was back during new wave in the late '70s and early '80s,
Yeah,
and so I found a whole lot of great music at the time that I never would have come across before because the promoters would send it to the radio station, as you would guess, and we'd listen to it and decide if we liked it or not. And now it's like, how do I find this stuff? I don't know. So what I usually do is I go to YouTube and I type in bands I like and see what else pops up on the side, and I just randomly click it. Or sometimes I go on and
yeah,
say, "Ska, give me some good ska music," and I see what pops up and I try. And I found a couple of bands that I really liked that I never heard of before.
yeah,
Um, and I started downloading their stuff, and really enjoying it. But it's you got to search for it. You really got to do your
yeah,
work. You're doing your homework.
yeah,
You can't go in and browse anymore.
yeah. And if it's an artist I like, I'm sure you're this way because you talked about it. You want to get every album they put out, even the
Mhm.
stinkers.
Yeah,
Or you don't know it's a stinker because they may put out a new album. It might be the best album of their career, at least in
yeah,
your eyes. And so, a group I always liked was Information Society. Of course, their first album was a big mega hit, and the rest have been like, but I've always kind of liked their material. And it's only because I've done research on looking on Wikipedia, and then they list all the albums they've released, and I find out they've released 3 albums in the last decade. I didn't know that, and so I had to go and order them because no store ever carries them. They didn't chart.
you,
Nobody knows. I don't even know why they bothered to release them. And they're really
yeah,
good albums. At least if you're a fan of that group, it's the same sound. It's the same type of stuff. It's the same people. It's just
yeah.
how do you find out about this
Yeah,
stuff
you got to
nowadays?
do your research these days. It doesn't come easy, especially with radio stations all being run by big conglomerates that don't encourage a lot of different sounds.
Yeah.
Radios all sound alike today, and when the '60s, the DJ could play whatever he wanted. He'd
Yeah.
play a rock song followed by a soul song, followed by a country song and a novelty song, and then some Barbara Streisand song. Radio was eclectic at the time, and we learned a lot and got a lot better musical education because of it.
Yeah.
If you grow up listening to only one thing, you're not going to get a very good musical education.
Yeah. And that's what I liked too, is the variety. I mean, when it got a little more strictly top 40 and they dumped a few things like, say, novelty records or, something that kind of didn't fit the format, I was okay with that because it's like, hey, if I want to listen to country, I'll go to the country station or something
Yeah.
like that. But, now it's like, it's odd, like if you want to listen to top 40, the weird thing about top 40 stations now, and I think it has to do with because the way artists release their material nowadays is they'll still be playing stuff from the 90s as new because like using, let's say, Adele as an example. Somebody said this is a joke. I'm waiting for her next album called 70, because she always names them after her age and she takes so long to make a new album, so yeah, and I get it, it's like, so you can't really, going bringing it all back to round circle to the Beatles. The Beatles were putting like 2 or 3 albums in a year, sometimes more. If you put out a greatest hits or a live, well, they didn't do a live album, but or
Yeah.
some other type of album.
No, but that was normal. Bands would put out 2 albums a year, sometimes three. I mean, the Monkees put out one every 5 months.
Right.
The Turtles put out one every 5 months. Tommy James put out one every 3 months, it seems like. And
Yeah.
so that's just how things were done back then. And the Beatles kind of broke that when they spent so long to make Sergeant Pepper, but they still put out 2 albums a year. They
Yeah.
still did,
Yeah.
and they followed their contract, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And that was unusual at the time. I wish
Yeah.
sometimes I wish that would happen again. Nowadays, bands spend 3 years making one album.
Yeah. I think it's funny, when John Lennon retired all those years, everybody thought it was forever,
It
and
was only five
nowadays
years.
5 years is like jump change, I guess, for some of these
Yeah.
groups, you know.
Well, yep, absolutely. So,
And then, I guess in the old days, you never thought a group like, say, the Monkees would come back and do another album 10, 20, 30 years later, you figured, oh, well, this is done,
well, and of course, back in those days, the idea of anyone old making rock and roll was absurd. I mean, I still remember when I was young and getting an album by the sensational Alex Hardy band, a very fun band from Scotland. And they no, they're clever. I saw them open for Jethro Tull, believe it or not. And I read about it, and the lead singer was over 40, and I went, "That's impossible. Who ever heard of a 40-year-old doing rock and roll?"
yeah.
And things have changed.
Well, there's a meme going around that the ages of the Traveling Wilburys when they did the first album, and the elder statesman was Roy Orbison at the age of 52. And it's like, everybody else is in their 40s, and it's like, oh geez, but it's like, you got the impression, oh, this is what you do in your retirement years, this kind of super group thing, and it's like,
Yeah,
unfortunately, 3/5 of them are now dead, but it's like, and they
yeah,
all kind of died young, so maybe it was,
true.
but I do say this about music anyway. I always think that if you're a musician, especially rock and roll, you're on borrowed time after age 50 anyway. So, it's like, um, you know,
Well, so many good musicians have not been able to keep their business up. Huge, gigantic stars that are playing small clubs these days, but at least they're still playing. That's always good, and I'm glad some of them are playing in small clubs because that's the only way I can afford to see them.
right. So who are you seeing? I know you're seeing someone really soon. So,
Oh yeah, I'm seeing
um,
Mickey Dolenz tomorrow.
okay.
He's going to be at that concert, and then we have tickets for Sparks in a couple of weeks too.
Oh,
This will be
cool.
my fifth time seeing Sparks. They're another one of my favorite bands, obviously,
Hmm.
and they're another one of those bands where I bought every record, even though I went, "Oh, this isn't very good," because they had a long period where they were just not very creative, and they fortunately have gotten a lot better again. It's like
Hmm.
they learned how to do it again. I don't know what's going on with it, but this isn't about Sparks. Let's talk about the Beatles.
I thought you had already seen Sparks. I do have to ask this about Sparks. You said you've seen them 5 times. When was the first time you saw them?
First time I saw them was in Boston. I didn't get to see them in their first run around. So this was around 85, 86 or so
Oh,
at a
okay.
small club. And Heidi and I were right up against the stage. I mean, I practically could have reached out and touched them. It was wonderful. So,
Cool.
and the worst thing about it was I had a band in Boston at the time. And I got there, and the opening act was another band from Boston that really sucked. And I went, "How the hell did they? If I had known they were going to get a local band to open for them, I would have begged. I would have done it for free." Oh, well.
Well, bringing it back to the Beatles, then again, have you seen any Beatles, any solo, any kids, anybody?
No, I have not. I have not. Every time I
Really?
think
Wow.
it's just so expensive, man.
Yeah.
I can't justify that kind of cost. I'm not a rich lawyer, and
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
got a disabled wife that I have to take care of, and we just don't have a lot of money to spend. I just can't justify spending hundreds of dollars to see something,
Yeah.
and that's just me.
Yeah.
I, you know, I,
Well,
I grew up poor. I didn't have a lot of money, and I'm very frugal about some things.
yeah. Well, even things that I like, I saw a lot of those. I did see Paul 5 times, but the last time was 2005, and it was $50 a ticket, and so that was hideous. Because before it was like $20, thirty
Yeah,
dollars.
yeah. I saw
And
rock
you
concerts when
know,
I was young when I paid $15. Yeah, of course.
yeah, and so
I saw the Ramones for $3. Come on.
yeah. Now I am going to see Ringo this year. I'm going to see him in June. Part of the reason is my wife says, "Oh, I've never seen Ringo. Can I see him?" And I said, "Oh, I've seen him 5 times too." But well, I'll check into it. Now, if he was hundreds of dollars, no, I wouldn't. But he actually lowered his prices since the last I
Oh,
looked, and I don't
okay.
know if he's doing that nationwide. But here, The tickets were $50 each, which $50 now is reasonable, especially when it's
Oh,
Ringo and
absolutely. No,
you get
I'm spending like
a
eight.
bunch of other big stars together in the all-star band.
Oh,
So, but I know a couple years ago, before the pandemic or something, he was charging about 200 a ticket. He was
yeah,
up there,
that was fun.
and I think he was getting it back then, but I think times are a little bit slow and he doesn't want to have an empty empty place to play. So,
Yeah, that's a
lower
good
the
point.
price a little bit.
Oh, I'll check into it then.
So
That,
if Ringo's coming to your town, check into it because he's more reasonable this time around.
yeah,
You
I
know,
definitely will.
can't say the same about McCartney, but it's like, you know.
Yeah.
But Ringo shows are always fun. Anyone I've ever brought to Ringo, even the first time I went to see Ringo, which was in '89, um, I brought a bunch of friends and they go, Ringo, what's he done? Yellow Submarine? Is that it? He did other songs. And then they went and, yes, Ringo did Yellow Submarine, but he did with a little help from Ringo. Oh, I didn't know that was Ringo. Yeah, it's Ringo. And oh, it don't come easy. I didn't know that was, yeah, it's Ringo.
Yeah.
And then, back then it was he had Joe Walsh and Billy Preston and two guys from the band, Rick Danko and I forgot the
Mhm.
other guy. But they all sang their hits, and so when I left, everybody's like, "Oh, that was a great concert," And I said,
Yep.
see, it's like, Ringo's not a slouch. You're just gonna put some crap out there. He wants to try to do a quality show, and in general, I think he has all these years. So
You
anyway,
think Ringo and Paul will ever tour together?
no.
No, I don't need. I mean,
Although
everyone's.
Paul did show up once, I think,
Oh,
to a
they've shown
Ringo
up. Yeah,
to a
yeah,
Ringo concert. But I'm saying it in that way because, it's like Paul is like the star and Ringo's like the underling, it shouldn't be, but
yeah.
and Ringo's shown up even in Wings Over America. I think Ringo showed up in LA, but it's like to have Paul showed up at an all-star concert, um, that actually happened once a few years ago, but it wasn't here. I think it was back east somewhere. I think it was in New York or something. Um, but it happened once, But I remember a few years earlier, Mad Magazine did a joke about that. It was like one of those "Don't You Hate" type books, but it was like you can be assured, and one of them was you can be assured if Ringo's having an all-star band, one of them will not be Paul McCartney.
Yeah. No, he doesn't need anyone to overshadow him. No,
Yeah,
definitely. And Paul would definitely overshadow him. Yeah.
yeah. Actually, I think would be neat. Now, I've heard that they may be recording together, but it'd be interesting if they toured together. It would be Paul and Ringo with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards.
Yeah, that's the rumor. But apparently, what happened was Paul and Ringo are playing on like one song or something
Yeah,
on their next album, and suddenly the rumor got out of control. I did read about that a couple of weeks
yeah.
ago. Yeah.
And for
So
years, I said, it'd be fun if it was Paul and Ringo with Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey. But then, it's like because it's funny. Both the Who and the Rolling Stones don't have an original drummer or bassist anymore.
yes, exactly.
But
That's been the line, but no, that's not going to happen.
yeah, I
Paul's
know,
like,
I know.
never. Paul didn't even want to take second from John, so I don't think he's going to take it from anybody
Yeah.
else.
Well, what is your opinion of this? I have mine, and I'll give it to. I'll give mine in a second. But what do you think McCartney's relationship is within the rock and roll industry?
Oh boy. You want me to give my opinion first, huh? I
Yeah,
think they all respect him literally for all the things he's done in the past, and I think they consider him an elder statesman who is beyond his time. I think that's
mm,
probably what a lot of insiders think, whether they're right or not. I mean, because he still fills stadiums and his albums still sell after all these years.
yeah,
It's kind of insulting, but I certainly had got that impression because from they don't he doesn't get played on the radio. He puts out a new album and it's pretty much here's an album for all you oldies fans. And that's how it's treated
mhm,
nowadays.
yeah.
What?
Um, well, pretty much the same thing, except the other thing is I always have gotten the impression since even in the Beatles days that McCartney is a little bit of a control freak, and so he doesn't really make friends within the industry easily. Like
I
even the
agree.
yeah, yeah, like even the time when he did do some recordings with Elvis Costello, it wasn't like, happiness and light and sweetness. And because the album I wanted to see, and I'm sure you did too, is you wanted to see McCartney and McManus. That would be the name of the album, and they're posing on the album like this,
Yeah.
no wings, no McCartney,
I, I
Linda,
think
and all that stuff. And
some of Paul's, whoops, someone trying to sneak in.
oh yeah,
I
that's
think
my wife.
best, some of Paul's best stuff is the stuff he did with Elvis. I mean, if nothing else, lyrically wise, Elvis taught Paul, you can't just write these "I love you" songs all the time. They have to have a story behind them.
Right.
So I agree. Some of the stuff from Flowers in the Dirt and some of the B-sides that didn't make the album are just wonderful, wonderful stuff. Back on My Feet is one of my favorite Paul McCartney songs.
Yeah.
So
But I'm
yeah, I
just
agree. And
hoping someday that they would take all, I wanted them to do it back then, but take the songs from Flowers in the Dirt and Spike and what's the what's the other Elvis Costello album? And
Angry, something like a rose.
yeah.
Might
And
be
then
like a rose.
Off
Yeah,
the Ground by McCartney.
yeah.
Strip all the other tracks away and just have a McCartney McManus album, like it should have been back in 1990. But it's like, I don't know.
Well, at least they may have written it together and may have played on a few songs together, but obviously it didn't happen.
Yeah,
But Paul's done that. Look how many times Wings changed, and just it was around what 6, 7 years long, and it changed constantly. It's like every album it was a
yeah,
different lineup.
yeah,
And certainly from some of the people who have written about it, some of the old band members, they talk about Paul's controlling nature.
yeah,
Paul say, "Oh, we're going to have a band. Everyone's going to be in the band, and you each get solo songs, but I'm going to control every bit of it and tell you which song you're going to sing and how you're going to sing it." And they were like,
yeah. Because it's odd that over the years, the times when a Beatle reunion could have happened, like concert for Bangladesh, of course Ringo signed up immediately. John was going to apparently, except George didn't want Yoko. That ended that, but Paul was like flat against it. He's like,
"Yep,
no, and it's like, come on. But I noticed Paul doesn't even like to take part in other like ensemble supergroup type things. Like had John remained alive, I think the Plastic Ono Band thing might have evolved even further, where it would be John partnering, because he was doing it anyway. He partnered with Elton John for a song, and he
yeah."
partnered with David Bowie for a song. And I think, had he continued, I think there probably would have been a John Lennon B-52s thing or something like that, probably with Yoko. But
Possibly,
you know,
except if you look at Double Fantasy, it's kind of a disappointing John album in many ways because it almost feels like he's sold out. The earlier albums were angry and full of all kind of, John would criticize Paul for writing happy songs about family life, and then he comes out with this album that's really L.A. slick produced. It
yeah,
sounds like a Billy Joel production, which doesn't seem right for John. It just doesn't fit John in my mind. And it
yeah,
was a little bit too slick, and the songs were all, happy. Songs were all personal, which is something we could talk about with John as well. I think he got, ever since Ballad of John and Yoko, he just got to the point where every song was so personal. There's a reason people aren't covering them because they can't make it about themselves. They can't put their own story into it because it's a John story. And I
yeah,
kind of got tired of hearing John. Yes, it's okay to write about your life every once in a while, but when every song is about your life, maybe your ego should be checked a little bit.
yeah. Well, I always thought, had he lived, he wouldn't have put out that many more albums. People always go, "Oh, he would have." No, because
No,
Lennon was naturally lazy. He even admitted as much. I think
yeah,
he would have done more touring, and I still think that, based on what I was starting to say about him teaming up with people, and he played with Chuck Berry on Mike Douglas show, that I think he would do more guest appearances on other people's concerts. It wouldn't be just a one-off with Elton John. Madonna would have Lennon out, or
yeah,
and um, even Taylor Swift now. Let's bring him out, John Lennon. And it's like he has no interest in these people, but he'll go out there and sing a couple songs. Which is kind of ironic because he always said, "I'm not gonna play She Loves You when I'm 30." Yeah, but you'll probably play "Come Together" when you're 80 if he was still
yeah,
around.
yes,
I don't know. It's like I always thought that, I not that I wanted Lennon to die, but it's like if his career ended then, it used to bum me out. I said, "Oh, he had so many years of material, no, no, no." And then I thought about it and I go, he barely had enough material to do a second album. That Milk and Honey album is a little bit weak, and then I don't think even if you polished it up and re-recorded it and everything and made it all nicey, other than Nobody Told Me, the rest of the album is kind of even on Lennon stuff, you
And
know.
Nobody Told Me was a song that he had written for Ringo
Yeah,
originally.
so who
Yeah,
knows?
so who knows? Who knows how old that song was when he recorded it exactly. All right. So
So, let's see.
anyway,
Well, let's talk about this, and then we can talk more Beatles. So, we did two books together, and I'll bring them up because I got them here, unless you want them too. Okay. Long title: Looking for the Good Times, Examining the Monkey Songs One by One.
we need to have
And
the second edition.
and
Second.
yeah, I do have a second edition. How about that? So there it
There you
is.
go.
You know.
Yes.
Now, why did we do this? Why did we update this?
Are you asking me, or is that
Yeah,
what?
well, I'm having you as the guest answer, even though I know the answer.
Well, there are a couple reasons. Reason number one is because we knew there were not going to be any more Monkees albums. Obviously, with Mike gone, Mickey's the only one left, and he's not going to put out an album called The Monkey. And there had been another album, the Christmas album that was done, and then there was a live album with Mike and Mickey, but it was listed as a Monkees album, so we counted that one. But there were two more albums we wanted to put in the book, and there were some mistakes in the book too, and things we wanted to correct, and things we wanted to expand and say more on. But also, I think we wanted to relay it out because the original book, we didn't have a lot of control over the layout, although it was done very well. I actually am very proud of that layout. The pictures didn't necessarily match the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we made sure, whenever we possibly could, we had a picture that was the right time. Like this picture is taken around the same time as the stuff we're talking about on that
Right.
page, as opposed to before when the pictures were just random all over the whole book. So I think it makes it a little bit more historically a better read because of that. And like I said, we also fixed a few things that we noticed, added some stuff, and there's a couple songs we had missed that we put in there. And in my chart in the back of the book had a mistake that I corrected, so there's things like that.
One thing I liked, and I don't think you asked my permission one way or the other, but I would have said yes anyway, is we put all the, like, we have an intro with Howard Kalin. Before, I don't believe it had his photo, and all these quotes from different celebrities. You've added a photo of that celebrity, sometimes even with one of the Monkees if you didn't have it. And I think it makes for a better thing, because then you go, oh, that's who Butch Patrick is. Oh, that's who Peter Noon is, and things like that, rather than just have a name there and you're like, who is this person? What are
I
they?
did a lot of work on the
Yeah,
layout. I
yeah,
actually did, and I got permission from some of those people to use those photos. I talked to Gene Friedman, and he sent me his picture that he had with Peter Tork. So we
yeah,
made sure that the book was as. I like this version a lot better than the first version.
yeah. I do too, actually, and I thank you for kicking me in the butt to do it, because honestly, if it was my own book, I probably would have just left it. Like I did my own Beatles book called Mark Arnold Picks on the Beatles back in 2011. It's
Yeah.
still the same 2011 edition, and there's been lots of stuff released since. I mean, I think about going back to it, but like I said, I don't have anybody kicking me in the pants to do it. I mean, if it was
Right.
flying off the shelves, I'd probably go,
Yeah,
time for an
exactly.
update. But I think our
Well,
Monkees book generally sells pretty well, and I think
it,
it was
it
a welcome
does.
addition.
It does sell pretty well, and like I said, we knew this would be this. There won't be a third edition. We knew this was
Right.
the final edition. Once I hate to say it, but once Mickey is gone, we probably might update the headquarters as well.
Yeah.
Um, but then that will be the final edition of that as well. Because there'd be no reason to go past it.
Yeah. Because I think at this point, especially with all these super deluxe Supremo Monkees collections of headquarters and more of the Monkees and everything else, I mean, everything has been scoured off the shelves by Andrew Sandoval. I mean, I don't think there's anything else.
No,
Um,
I can't imagine what else they. I mean, even if they released the box set for Pisces, we probably already have all those songs. It's just going to
right.
be minor remixes and things, that won't really count.
Right. Because when Charles Rosenan and I interviewed Chip Douglas, I mean, he alluded to some newer songs that he had dug out, but some of those made it onto the Christmas album. They were the Davy Jones Christmas songs. And he alluded to other rarities beyond that. But, if there is like a single new song that just happened to have been missed the vaults or something. I don't know if it warrants a whole other book, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I would agree with you there.
so I don't know. So, but I don't know, twist my arm, but I think, yeah, probably a more, I'm more inclined to help you with an update on headquarters, you know, which
When
is,
that
yeah,
when that happens, hopefully no time.
yes, hopefully that'll be 20, 30 years from now, so we don't have to
Yes.
worry. Anyway, so that's
That
this
one,
one.
that one, for those who are listening, is more of a biography. We go year by year through everything that they did in their solo years once the show went off the air, basically.
And it's not too out of date. At least it goes to 2020. See,
It goes into,
so we'll do an update
yep.
many years later. Anyway, so all right. Let's see. What other
So
thing? Anything else to talk about?
no, I'm just saying I'm going to be seeing Mickey on Sunday, and hopefully I can. I'm planning on bringing a copy of the second edition to try to give to Andrew. Hopefully he will be there, and I can give it to him, and I can see him if they'll let me.
Okay. And then I'll give a plug for one more thing, and have to thank you for this also. So Charles Rosenet and I worked on a Turtles book, and I know you're a
Yes,
Turtles fan too.
absolutely.
We finally turned it in. It took a long time because we were trying to get interviews and interviews and interviews. And we got Howard. We never got Mark, unfortunately, and we kept trying and Ron Dante even kept trying and stuff like that. But we did get an interview that is kind of a rare one that. Some other people did. We got permission to use, and so um, that's in lieu of that. But the book is turned in, and I think a couple nights from now, Charles and I are going to do like a podcast video thing with our publisher to talk about the progress and what goes on. So, but we tried to follow the format that you and I, probably you, instigated with the Monkees book in the first place, because I don't know, you kind of came up with you know how to list it,
Organize it.
significant cover versions and players and chart position and blah 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 in that format. So we tried to kind of follow the similar format, so hopefully you'll be impressed when it does come out. So
I'm definitely looking forward to reading it, no matter what.
yeah, so I don't know a date, but I know when we first signed with this publisher, it's called Genius Publishing, they were thrilled with it, and they said, let's get it out by Halloween. I don't know why they said Halloween. They just thought Turtles used to do or Flo and Eddie used to do Halloween concerts, and they thought that was probably a good idea. So I said, okay,
Sure.
but I don't want to rush it to make it bad. So it's
No, I
like
know. I had the same problem with the Monkees book. I mean, the
yeah,
Monkees, so the Beatles book that just came out.
yeah.
Uh, it ends in the year 2021. It
Mhm.
is as far as I go with the things, because that's when I turned it in. Here it is a year and a half later, and finally it's out. And it's like I wanted to update it, and they said, no, this is how long it takes for a book to get done. I was like, ah. But they did an excellent job in the layout, so I can't
Mhm.
complain too much. They really did a good job.
Yeah. Well, I guess, that gives an excuse, just like all these other ones, that, eventually can do another update, because I'm sure, barring something terrible happening, there's going to be a few more charting Beatles or solo albums coming in the
Yeah.
next few years. So, you can put out
Well, yeah.
an
You know,
update with that.
every time every time they re-release, a new remix, hopefully they're working on Rubber Soul next. I'm hoping,
Yeah, I
I'm
think they are. Yeah.
parts, so yeah, that will change things. So if you look at the book, you'll see. I'm going to bet that if I did the charts today, Revolver would be higher, and also Let It Be would be higher, since they were both on the charts at the time. You know
Mm-hmm.
that the book ended.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say about it that was kind of interesting, and that just slipped my mind, and let me look through it in 1 second here, and I'll figure it out. Um,
Oh, this book, Beatles on the Charts, available
yes,
now.
I know. I'm looking, and nobody's paying attention to me.
Along with my other.
Uh, so I didn't realize you didn't include songs that didn't chart at all. It's like I thought you had put every release,
Well,
period, or at least every regular release.
well, if they didn't make the chart, they didn't get any points, so there's no need to do a countdown for them. But if you look in the back of the book, there is a discography. It does list
Oh,
everything
okay. All
in the
right.
back, and it'll say next to it whether it hit the chart or whether it didn't. So yes, everything is listed. There is complete discography in the book.
Okay. It
Um,
just won't necessarily have a chart placement on your charts if it
Correct. It didn't make
didn't make
because it
any points. Got it.
chart. It
Okay. All right.
doesn't. Yeah, here it is. Beatles discography, where I go through every year. I don't know if you can get it focused or not,
Yeah.
and
It says
it shows what.
2021 at the end. Yeah.
That's as
So
far as I got. Yep. So yeah, the last entry is for "Change the World" by Ringo, which didn't make the chart, and so therefore there's no number next to it. So that was
okay,
just an
so
easy.
that will explain, because I was actually looking for it. There is a single by Yusef, or Cat Stevens, that he sings with McCartney and with Dolly Parton, called "Boots in Sand," which is a great song. I can't tell where McCartney is on it, actually. It's one of those, just like the Rihanna one with
Yeah.
Kanye, but it's a good song regardless. And I thought, how come it's not on here? But yeah.
Well, did Paul get equal credit with them for it?
Yes, yes, yeah. And there is a very rare 7-inch single, so, but I don't think it charted anywhere. So
That because
yeah.
I was going, did I miss it? Did I miss one? But
No, yeah, but that explains why it wouldn't be there. It's like if it didn't chart at all. And I could have sworn I saw the Christmas album in there, but then you said it wasn't on there, and I go, oh, I guess it wasn't. But I guess I wasn't going
yeah, the month.
chronologically to say, okay, there's this one and there's this one, and it's like, okay. So that was the
Yeah.
one yeah, so that was, now that explains it. But yeah, if you haven't heard that song, it's on YouTube. There's a video for it. It's called "Boots and Sands," and yeah, it's Yusef with McCartney and Dolly Parton. And I guess you can hear McCartney in the background, but it definitely is Cat Stevens, and you can
Okay.
tell that Dolly's singing in the background. But yeah,
But that's it. Paul sang on backgrounds of lots of albums. I mean, he worked on Bonzo Dog Band. He
right.
worked with. He did a lot of things. George produced lots of things. If we listed everything they had ever done with any other person, the book would be 9 miles thick. Right?
Yeah,
It's worth it.
that's true.
Yeah.
And, all right. Anything you're working on now?
Nothing nonfiction. I'm just working on trying to finish a sequel to my last novel, and I got a couple more ideas for some anthologies that I'm talking to my publisher about.
Okay.
That's it. There should be another anthology coming out later this year, and I'm actually trying to think about doing some audio versions of my novels. I've
Okay.
got an audio version of the Constitution book, How to Argue the Constitution with a Conservative, but I haven't, and it's selling okay.
Mhm.
I didn't want anyone else to read it, so I figured, hey, if I can do that, I can maybe do some of my novels. So that's my next project, hopefully. How about
Any
you?
well, wait a minute. I want to ask on the Constitution book. Any updates on that one?
No, I theoretically I could update it every year, especially after the Dobbs decision. Now I have a
Yeah,
lot
well,
to say.
that's what I was kind of alluding to without saying it
Yeah.
directly.
Well,
It
I'm
was
waiting to see what my publisher says.
okay.
If he's
Yeah,
willing to do it, that'd be something I
right.
would be.
I mean, obviously, if there's another constitutional amendment, but I don't know how likely that is at this point. I mean, since the
Yeah.
27th one just was a fluky thing, and it happened, what, 30 years ago? Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's been a while.
Getting 3/4 of the states to agree on something is very, very, very difficult. So I don't expect that to happen.
Right.
And there's so many other ideas that should be changed in the Constitution before that one, like getting rid of the Electoral College.
I'll just ask this quickly, and then I'll talk about my own projects. But the Equal Rights Amendment, it had a few more states ratify it. But I mean, does that mean anything, or is that just pomp and circumstance? Because isn't it expired, so it can't really be passed, even if you got every state in agreement on it?
If the original bill had a deadline, then yes, it would be expired. But I'm not sure if it did. Just like the 27th Amendment didn't have a deadline, which was
Okay.
actually written by James Madison and got passed 200 years later.
Okay.
So it depends on
Now,
what the original bill said. Yeah.
let's say it did have a deadline, which I think it did, but let's say definitely it did. What would happen? I mean,
Uh,
could
I
they
think
undo it and say, all right, we want to pass this anyway? I mean, how does that
I
work?
think what would happen is if they did it past the deadline and someone challenged it to the Supreme Court might say, yes, it's past the deadline. And then the states say, okay, fine, we'll just pass it again right now and it'll get done in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So somebody might say it's not worth appealing to the Supreme Court, is what I'm trying to say. Plus,
Okay.
you have to have standing. I'm not sure who would have standing to appeal a constitutional amendment. That's an interesting question.
Subject for the next chapter in the book. I don't know. Anyway, all right. What am I working on? Well, I was getting all excited because I finally turned in my Mad Magazine book called Unconditionally Mad. And then this is in March, I turned it in. And then I finally got an interview with Sam Viviano, the art director for 20 years over at Mad, and he gave me a lengthy 3-hour interview, which will be one of these podcast episodes or two coming up. It'll be up by the time this is up. But I said, so because he said a lot of good stuff. So I went to Ben at Bear Manor, and I said, I got another interview, and it was Sam Viviano, and he says, "Oh, he's good. Okay, you don't have to, So I'm
So
almost done transcribing it. I've been transcribing for the last couple of weeks. I'm about 5 minutes away at the end of the interview. So, I mean, which 5 minutes to transcribe takes about an hour or two,
yeah, yeah,
because that's how it works. But my goal is to turn it in again at the end of April. So hopefully it'll be out this
that's
year.
good.
But it is a complete history of Mad, and I interviewed a lot of other people. You can see them on other past episodes of this podcast: Dick DeBartolo, Tom Richmond, who else? Kit Lively. Um, some are not so well known because I only did one or two pieces, but hey, it's like, uh, but Pat Moriarty is one. He touts himself as the last idiot standing, or the last idiot hired, or something. I forgot what he said. It's on the
All right.
podcast, but he said some funny things, and he only made a couple of appearances in Mad before the whole thing with Morrison. And I interviewed Bill Morrison, got the hook, and that was the end of Mad. But I've tried to update it just like you do and I do with the Monkees books and everything else.
Yeah.
I have it to the current issue number 31, but uh, I
By
at
the time
least
the
am
book comes
glad,
out, yeah.
since it took me 4 years to do it, at least I'm glad that they did one last hurrah a few months
Yeah.
ago with number 28, where they did a 70th anniversary issue and got as many people as they could
Yeah.
back.
The big
And
reunion is, yes.
that's probably going to be it. I mean, if they do it again for the 75th, who's going to be here? I don't know. We'll probably not even be here. No, I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's coming
Well,
out. Turtles book's coming out. I don't know if my Warren Kremer book's ever coming out. That's in approval hell from the family, so who knows? So it's really on the back burner. As far as brand new books, and I mentioned this on some recent podcasts, but they may not be up yet either. TV car, TV. Wait, how's it? What's the title of it? TV cartoons that time forgot. And basically, Jerry Beck and I were discussing just possible books I could write and stuff like that, because he's not up to writing as many books as I do. So he kind of throws ideas my way, and some I go, that's pretty good, and some I don't. So as you may or may not know, I did a book on Patty Freeling. I did a book on Total Television. So it's like, what other studios are there that haven't had a book? I mean, people have done a Filmation book. There's been a Hanna-Barbera book. There's been,
yeah.
all the other major studios, Looney Tunes, Fleischer, and other. So what's left? And I decided, after talking with him about it, is talk about all those studios that basically are known for maybe like one, maybe two different Saturday morning shows, and everybody usually attributes them to Jay Ward or something because they don't know who made them, like
Right.
Calvin and the Colonel or something like that. So, and so
You're gonna be concentrating on the shows or the studios?
it's on the studios, and it'll
Okay.
talk about each thing that studio did, because a lot of them didn't really do Saturday morning cartoons. That was just a side thing. The main thing is they're doing like TV commercials and maybe segments for Sesame Street and things like that.
Mhm.
Um, Originally, I was going to do from like the beginning of time to now, and then I said, whoa, 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 whoa. It's like, after 1980, it goes from like, it's like there's only like so many studios, and then after 1980, whoop, and it's like, ah. So I
Cable.
made 1980 my cutoff. I decided just to do American studios unless it was kind of hybridish, because I don't really want to talk about Japanese animation and all the other stuff because it's just too much. I mean, this can make, so I whittled it down to basically 15 studios. So there's like Hal Seeger,
Mhm.
Krantz, Grand Trey Lawrence. I can't think of all of them. TV spots, different ones like that. So, and once I get this Mad book out of the way, that's what I'm working on. So, and I started it, but it's really skeletal right now. So anyway, and
No, good
that's,
luck with that. I'm looking forward to that one too.
thank you.
All right.
All right. And so one last question. Are you doing any appearances, any shows again? You did one at the Beatles convention pretty recently, I think. Anything coming up?
No, mostly I do science fiction conventions
Okay.
because I'm selling my anthologies and things more than anything else. Although I do always bring the Beatles books and the Monkees books with me. There was one I was going to go to next weekend down in Richmond, Virginia, but we had to cancel because of my wife's health. A week later, there's one in New Jersey called Heliosphere, and there's a couple more, but it's all on my webpage. If you go to michaelaventrella.com or just michaelventrella.com, there's a list of every place you can ever find me, plus links to all my books and links to all my interviews, including with Mark.
Yay. All right. Well, thank you for being my guest once again, Michael. I'm losing my voice, as you can tell. um, excuse me. Too many podcasts. This is like number 214, I believe. So here we go.
Wow.
Anyway, so I appreciate when you do another book. Come on back on the show, and we'll talk again. All right.
Thank you very much.
So let me do an outro. This has been Mark Arnold, and we were here with Michael A. Ventrella. His latest book is The Beatles on the Charts. And of course, we have done two Monkees books together, which I will show you here. And they're all available on the usual websites, Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, or you can order them through the publisher. Publishers are either Bear Manor, or in the case of the Beatles book, it's McFarlane, or some of the other publishers, because I know Michael's worked with many other publishers than I have. Anyway, so that about wraps it up for this episode of the Fun Ideas podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.